Okay, now practical applications of hydrology. So why we need to study this hydrology with the practical aspects. So the first one is design of hydraulic structures. So one best hydraulic structure everyone knows, that I can call it as dam or a reservoir. Okay, dam or a reservoir. Now if you check out, if you want to build a dam, so what all is required? If I ask this question, basically it will the list will go on. Okay, but in major categories, if you want to subdivide that, so here you need to have some civil engineer for basically maintaining the construction. Then you may need to have some structural engineer to give the structural design for constructing the civil engineer. Along with that, even you need to have some hydrological engineer. Okay, so hydrological engineer to understand what will be the quantum of water that is going to end up at that particular point. Okay, so let me elaborate on that. Imagine you want to construct a dam. So usually why we construct a dam, or else where do we construct a dam? Imagine this is a river, and across this river we tend to construct the dam. Now why this dam usually will be constructed? So that the downstream area will be up on the upstream, basically the water will be stored, and the same stored water will be utilized on the downstream side during the summer season or non-rainy season. So you want to effectively utilize the stored water on the downstream side, so that's why you are going to construct this dam. I hope it is clear for you. Now just by selecting a site and constructing, let us say here, let us there is a 1,000 acres of land that you want to irrigate, so that's why you want to build up a dam, that you have taken the decision. Fine with that. So you have even selected the site for that dam, even that is okay. Now constructing with the help of civil and structural engineering is one part, but the second aspect is how much rainfall is occurring on the upstream side of this selected point, how much quantum of water is going to end up at this reservoir site is also going to be important. Because for this 1,000 acres of land to be irrigated, imagine you will require, let us say, 1 lakh cubic meter of water. Okay, so then it indicates what, at least the capacity of this dam should be how much, this much. Then capacity determination is fine, with respect to demand we have done it, but even the river should have at least this much amount of flow in it. Because if the flow itself is, let us say, only 50,000 cubic meter of water, then in what way you are going to store, or else you are going to supply this 1 lakh liter of water to the 1,000 acres that you have selected? So that is not at all practical. So that's why here, for selection of site for construction of any of the hydraulic structures, you even need a engineer who knows all about hydrology. So hydrology indicates what? It is going to deal with the amount of rainfall which is occurring, how the runoff is being generated, how much losses are going to occur, and how that particular flow of water is going to be there. So all those things will be dealt up with the hydrology person. So that's why even this, for any of the hydraulic structures work, your hydrology person is required. So that's why the knowledge of hydrology is going to help you in building any of the hydraulic structures. I hope it is clear for you. Next is with respect to the water supply or irrigation. Now you can just check out water supply or irrigation. So here also, if you want to supply the water to a city of, let us say, 1 lakh population, and based on those 1 lakh people, you have determined the demand, and let us say that is 1 crore liters of water per day. So at that point of time, even you should be able to check out the source of water for this water supply system. Because if you have a source, then only that water can be treated, and then it can be supplied to the entire city. Okay, if the water resource or a source itself is not capable of meeting the demand of the public, then entire water supply system will be failed up. So that's why here also you need to have the knowledge of water supply. Next, for irrigation, obviously, so if you want to irrigate any particular stretch of land, then you need to have the knowledge of how much quantum of water is going to reach that area, that is with the reservoirs, dams, bunds, or any other things. So those things are going to be available in irrigation works. Next we have hydropower. So obviously, so if there is a drastic difference in elevation in the land, and if the water is flowing through there, so definitely because of the potential energy which is going to be converted into kinetic energy whenever it is falling down, we can utilize this energy and we can generate the hydropower. So again here, why the hydrology is necessity, I'll tell you. Imagine there is this kind of scenario where there is a drastic change in elevation in the land surface. Because of that, you have built up a hydroelectric power plant at the bottom of that particular section. Now, if you build up, let us say 100 or else 1000 kilowatt hour system over here, that is, the system is capable of generating this much amount of current. For this current to generate, it should have a particular flow of water and with a particular quantum of water that should reach this plant. Okay, so if that particular water itself is not there, then this entire hydroelectric power plant system or a project will fail. So that's why here also, before going for such kind of projects, a hydrological engineer is required to tell you whether how much quantum and with how much time space that particular water is going to be available for your power plant to run. So even this is going to play an important role. So that's why even for hydropower plants, you require a hydrological person. Next, it is with respect to flood control. So again, flood control, as I told you with the syllabus. So in the third module with hydrographs, what we are going to study is we are going to predict the flood. So how much quantity of water will be coming with that flood, also at what time that flooding is going to occur. So such kind of works will happen through that hydrograph, and even for that flood control, you are going to have the work of or else you are going to need hydrological engineer. Now next thing with respect to navigation, as you know, even basically in India we don't have this navigation in canals because the amount of size of our canals will be quite less. But in different regions we have canals that are used even for the transportation, that is through navigation. So small boats will be traveling through those, so that there are n number of advantages even for that. So even for that navigation process, for the boats to move in those particular canals or water streams, so how much depth of water is required and how much quantum of water is going to be there, and what time the flow will be there because of the high tides and low tides, all those things will be coming under a hydrology person. So that's why even for a navigation projects to work out, you require a knowledge of hydrology. Next, erosion and sediment control. So even for these particular setups, erosion and sediment control, so when does the erosion occur? If I ask you that, when does the erosion occurs? Erosion usually occurs whenever there is a huge quantum of water flowing abruptly or immediately into a stream. Okay, imagine this, let us say this is the bed of the stream. Okay, and here I have bit of the sediments. Okay, usually the bottom of that river or stream will be covered with sediments. At this point of time, with regular flow of water, okay, so with a lesser velocity, this sediments will be settled down. So there is no movement of these sediments, only the water will be moving from the top. But whenever the rainfall occurs suddenly, or based on the amount of this velocity increase or the discharge increase, this particular sediments may be again become suspended. Settled sediments may become suspended and they may travel along the river. So at that point of time, what will happen? The erosion of soil will take place, as well as the sediment will be transported from one point to the another point. So for such kind of activity, you need the knowledge of hydrology, so that to understand if a rainfall is occurring, how much quantum of discharge is being created and what will be the velocity of flow in a river, channel or a canal, a man-made structure or a natural structure. So based on that, even the erosion and sediment control can be done with the help of hydrology. And the last one is pollution abatement. So pollution abatement in the sense what? It is how you are going to control the amount of pollution with the knowledge of hydrology. So for this, if I need to explain, Imagine a river is there, you have your city over here, and it is discharging the wastewater into the river. So at that point of time, this pollution abatement is what? By knowing the water quantity of water which is going to flow in this river, you can restrict the city or an industry to amount of waste which is being dumped over here. So what I meant by that is, usually in rainy season we have more amount of water flowing in the river. So let us say that time I have 1 lakh liter of water which is flowing. At that point of time I can tell him, you put, let us say, 1,000 liters of wastewater, and it will not harm our water resource. But similarly, in the summer season, when the flow of this water will be much less than this, at that time I can tell this particular industry or a city to reduce this particular discharge of water proportionally. So if this discharge is reduced by 50%, even we can ask them to reduce it by 50%. So basically there are different calculations that we need to do. So for your municipal and industrial wastewater treatment subject, we are going to study about that. So in general, if I need to say, even with the help of knowledge of hydrology, you can understand the flow of water and the duration of that flow, and in turn you can control, or proportionately you can dump the waste, and in turn you can actually control the amount of pollution that is going to occur in the surrounding. So even for this aspect, your hydrology knowledge is important. Now if you check out for my entire explanation over here, I have always tried to relate whatever you are going to write or discuss with the hydrology. So please remember that even in your examination, whenever you explain it, always that practical application should reach back to the hydrology. If you miss that part, then you are not going to get the marks. So even if you revise this right slide right now, what I have shown, every aspect I have tried it to match it with the knowledge of hydrology. So that is quite important. Now, precipitation. So, knowing about the hydrological cycle, different representations, and even the practical applications of hydrology, next thing comes is about the precipitation. So, if a precipitation needs to occur, then what all processes are required? Okay, so that we are going to check out here. So, basically, there are four things that needs to be seen over here. First thing is, atmosphere must have moisture. That is, if moisture is not available in the atmosphere, then there is no chance of having the precipitation. Second thing is, sufficient nuclei must be present to aid in condensation. So for this to explain, I'll just try to give you an example. Okay, imagine whenever I say this particular rainfall to occur, okay, so at that point of time we usually say that what we have, let us say a water body here, it is evaporating and the clouds are formed, and then the rainfall occurs. Okay, so this is for the entire whole what I can say atmosphere. Now instead of that, if I take, let us say, a small vessel, if I put some water into this, okay, and I'll lid it up, I'll cap this off, okay, and I'm going to heat this. Now what happens next? The water starts to boil, it will start to evaporate, and it will reach above. Okay, now the similarly, if I take one more vessel, I'll put the same quantity of water, I'll put instead of, I'll not cap this, but I'm going to heat this. At that point of time, water will boil, it will evaporate, and it will go on. But inside your house or a room or a controlled laboratory, even if you check, there is not a possibility of formation of cloud inside your house. You can try it out. Even if you want, you boil n number of vessels in your house, and if you boil that, so that water will never, evaporated water will never form clouds. The reason for that is what? You need nuclei to be present. So nuclei is a plural of nucleus. Nucleus is nothing but the basic your physics. It is nothing but a point or a matter at which to which the things can get attracted to. Okay, so here you can check out with respect to hydrology. I am trying to explain, if in atmosphere, okay, there should be some nuclei present. So what these nuclei are? Nuclei may be your dust particles, it may be your what I can say, soot particles, or that is burnt particles, or any of the suspended particles in the atmosphere. So those things are going to come under what? Your nuclei. If these are present, then what will happen is, I'll just try to enlarge this portion. Okay, now take this as a nuclei. Okay, take this as a nuclei. At that point of time, what will happen is, I'm just zooming this to a larger extent. So this particular nuclei, over this, the water vapor will start to accumulate. Okay, water vapor will start to accumulate, and this is going to form a small layer. Okay, so still it is in, this is not condensed. If it is condensed, it will convert it to liquid and it will fall down. Okay, but you can see even the clouds which are there. So that cloud, whenever the water is evaporating, you will not be able to see. Only with a particular angle you will be able to see the evaporated water. So on a hot summer afternoon, if you are going on a road, you can check out through that black tarmac. There will be some refraction that will be going on. If you see at a distance, you will be feeling that some amount of water is moving up. That particular scenario you might have faced. So that is nothing but the evaporation. But whenever it reaches at a particular height, you can actually see the clouds. So clouds will be colored, that is, it may be white, gray, based on the situation. But whenever it is evaporating, it will be completely transparent. I hope everyone will agree with this. Okay, so why this transparent vapor is being converted into color, that might be white, gray, or a dark gray, why it is being converted is because of these nuclei. Still they are in suspension, still they are vapors only, but they are having these nuclei, because of which what will happen, usually these nuclei will be oppositely charged to the water molecules. Okay, usually we say particles, these nuclei are negatively charged, or else you can say it as positively charged, and the water molecules surrounding that will be negatively charged. So they will attract and they will form this small molecule. So usually the size of these molecules will be around 10 microns in size. Okay, 10 microns in size. Now these colloids or suspended particles or nuclei which are present, so these itself will form these small isolated droplets, or else, sorry, these vapor bundles. So these vapor bundles together itself, you are going to make it as a cloud. Okay, so that's why this second point is important. This is because of these nuclei why the clouds are formed. If there are no nuclei, then there will not be any formation of cloud. Because you might have heard of seeding the clouds. Okay, artificial rain, seeding the clouds. So what actually they do with a helicopter or with the aeroplane in the atmosphere at a higher elevation is, they introduce these nuclei, because already the moisture is available in the atmosphere, but that moisture is not getting any nuclei to stick onto for the formation of cloud. So that's why you can imagine whenever the cloud seeding is taking place, it is nothing but they are introducing these nuclei. They put some chemicals into the atmosphere, chemicals in the sense those actually precipitate to form these nuclei. So once these nuclei are added, then the clouds will form. In turn, when the temperature goes down, your precipitation will occur. Okay, so now the third point is, weather condition must be favorable, that is, the temperature should reduce. The temperature should reduce. So at that point of time, what will happen, these clouds which are made up of nuclei and water vapors will be condensed, and then they are going to reach the earth's surface. The fourth point is reaching the earth's surface. So here the entire precipitation can be divided into four major factors on which it depends. One is the moisture should be there in the atmosphere. Second is sufficient nuclei must be present. Third is environmental conditions should be favorable, that is the temperature, the wind, so everything should be favorable for the formation of clouds. And the last one is the product of condensation must reach the earth's surface. If it is reaching the earth's surface, then only you are going to call that as a precipitation. Yeah, so I hope this is clear for you. Why nucleus, or what is that artificial rain falling? So all these are interlinked. Okay, so these nuclei, even though they are not visible, they are going to play an important role for condensation to occur or precipitation to occur. Now, forms of precipitation. So as I said, so there are 11 forms of precipitation which are available with us. So precipitation is indicating what? Just the water which is in any form, whether it is gas, liquid or solid, reaching from the atmosphere to the ground surface, we are going to call that as precipitation. Now, first and most obvious is what? Rainfall. So water droplets that have a diameter of at least 0.5 millimeter, it can be classified based on its intensity. So light rain up to 2.5 mm per hour, medium rain 2.5 to 7.5 mm per hour, and heavy rain more than 7.5 mm per hour. If the intensity of rainfall is this, so it can be subdivided or classified into light rain, moderate rain and heavy rain. And if for the rainfall, if you can call that precipitation as rainfall, then the size of that droplet should be at least 0.5 millimeters. So this is about the rainfall. Next we have snowfall. So precipitation in the form of ice crystals which usually combine to form flakes with an average density of 0.1 gram per cubic centimeter. That is, the snowfall in simplest of term is the precipitation in solid form, and that ice density should be at least with 0.1 gram per cubic centimeter. Now similarly drizzle. So drizzle is nothing but a form of rainfall, but here the intensity of rainfall will be less than 1 mm per hour. Okay, so intensity of rainfall will be less than 1 mm per hour, and even the rainfall droplet size will be less than 0.5 mm. So if I check out this rainfall, so the at least size should be 0.5 mm and more than that. Whereas here the size of that droplet will be less than 0.5, and even the intensity of rainfall will be very less, that is 1 mm per hour. And to give you the perspective of this is how you are going to identify this drizzle is, sometimes you might have felt this. So whenever the rainfall is occurring, instead of that rainfall directly reaching the earth's surface, what it might do is the rain droplets might wave based on the wind. Okay, instead of directly coming down to the earth, based on that wind your droplets may move around. Okay, so that scenario, if you have seen, why this droplets will move with respect to the wind, because the size of the droplets are first of all very less, and even the intensity of rainfall is very less. So that's why you are going to observe such kind of a movement. If you have observed that, then that is nothing but a drizzle. Now next thing is regarding the glaze. So glaze in itself, the word, whenever you hear that glaze, it is nothing but it feels like shining. Okay, so when the rain or drizzle touches the ground at 0 degrees Celsius, sorry for this, but it is 0 degrees Celsius, then glaze or freezing rain is formed. Glaze or freezing rain is formed. So the best example for visualization, if I need to give it, if you keep, let us say, a steel chair outside your house, okay, in a very not in India basically, since we rarely get this snowfall, if you keep this, let us say, in a cold countries or European countries, at that point of time what will happen, wherever this steel is available, so there will be a clear coating of ice that may be formed on this particular object overnight or at any point of time whenever the temperature is less. So at that point of time, whatever this sheen of ice is coating that is being done over here, that is nothing but the glaze. Okay, so again I'll repeat, when rain or drizzle touches the ground at 0 degrees Celsius, the glaze or freezing rain is formed. That is, so this shining transparent layer of ice sheet that is going to be formed on any of the objects, you are going to call that as a glaze. Now the next thing is sleet. So sleet is, it is a frozen raindrops of transparent grains which form when rain falls through the air at a sub-freezing temperature. So what do you mean by this is, rainfall is occurring, okay, and it passes through a layer of atmosphere where the temperature is below 0 degrees Celsius or sub-freezing temperature. At that point of time, in this particular zone, the liquid will be converted into solid and that will be coming down to the Earth's surface. And here the ice crystals which are being formed usually will be less than 4 mm size. So the size of ice or snow which has been formed over here usually will be of size 4 mm. So if that is the case, then you are going to call that as a sleet. So sleet as well as glaze are nothing but a form of snowfalls which are going to occur. Next is a hailstorm. So hailstorm, one more term what we can use is thunderstorm. Okay, so here you can check out, it is showery precipitation in the form of irregular pellets or lumps of ice of size more than 8 mm. So what do you mean by this? So this hailstorm in Kannada, if I need to explain, it is nothing but what your Anekalu, right? So whenever the rainfall is too intense with thunderstorm, there might be a possibility of getting that Anekalu directly on the ground. So instead of we'll get the liquid rainfall, but along with that, even the solid form of rainfall is also going to be there. So if that is the case, then you are going to call that as hailstorm. And here the condition is what? The pellets will be of irregular shape. Okay, then the size of that particular ice needs to be more than 8 mm. If that size of those particular what I can say those lumps of ice which are going to fall on, if it is more than 8 mm, then you are going to call that as a hailstorm. Next, it is snowflakes. So snowflakes are nothing but fused ice crystals are going to form the snowflakes. So the best visualization what I can give you is your English what I can say Disney movies. Okay, if you have seen any of those Disney movies, right? So even the cartoons, right now, what they show is they basically show that ice crystal something of this sort. Okay, so this microscopic ice figure which is going to be there, so that is nothing but what? Fused ice crystals. So right now what I have explained over here is nothing but ice crystals, and fusion of this will form the snowflakes. Okay, so here the snowflakes will have lesser size than the sleet what we have studied in the previous slide. Next we have something called as dew. Okay, it is formed on the earth's surface due to condensation as a result of cool surface during night. Okay, so few of the students get confused between dew and fog. Okay, let me explain with respect to that. First of all, dew, where do you hear this term? Most of the times during night cricket matches you heard or else you hear about this term a lot, that is dew. Okay, how they show that dew in a cricket match? Basically they rub their hands on the ground, on the grass, right? And they show if there is any moisture or water droplets on those grass, right? So whenever they rub their hands over here, so that itself they are going to show it as dew. So with this I can clarify one thing: the dew will be always formed on the earth's surface. So dew is always formed on the earth's surface. First point. Second point, even in that cricket matches, whenever it is a day match, they never talk about dew. Only during night matches they talk about dew. The reason being, this dew formation will be there on the earth's surface only during night time or during a lesser temperature period. So for Indian scenario, basically we have a hot days, so we'll never get a snowfall or a reduced temperature. So that's why this dew formation will always be there at the night when a cloud which is formed near the earth's surface touches or condenses near the earth surface. So I'll again repeat the definition now. It is formed on the earth's surface, as I told you, due to condensation as a result of cool surface during night. Okay, during night our earth surface will be much cooler. Because of this, whatever moisture is available which will get condensed directly there only, and because of that condensation, so your water droplets will be forming on the ground surface. So that is nothing but dew. So always remember cricket match whenever you think of dew, so that explanation will be much more easier. Now the next one will be fog. Okay, so when do you hear this term fog? Usually in the morning walks, right? So morning there is a lot of fog. Okay, so how does this, what this fog is? It is nothing but thin cloud of varying size formed on the earth's surface, usually in the mornings. It is a thin cloud of varying size formed in near the earth's surface during morning. So with this I can say always the fog which is there, that will be above the ground level. So dew will be with the ground or else on the ground surface, whereas fog will be on the above the ground level. At this point of time, in simplest of terms, how I can explain is formation of cloud near the earth's surface, you can call that as what? Fog. Formation of cloud near the earth's surface is nothing but fog. And why this creates in the morning? The reason is because of the environmental conditions. The temperature will be less and even the nuclei are present at a very lower elevation, because of which during the early sunrise, what will happen? The evaporation of water will be there, and because of that this fog is going to be there. And one more important bit here, if I need to explain, whenever you walk through that fog, okay, you will never get wet. If you put your hand through that fog, okay, if you just wave your hand in that fog, you will never, your hand will never feel that moisture, your hand will never get wet. The reason, because this is in the vapor stage. Whatever the fog you are seeing will be in the vapor stage, so that's why you will never feel that watery thing in your hand whenever you wave your hand in the fog. Now why I told you this point is because the next point form, that is mist. So it is basically a thin fog having numerous water droplets. That is, a mist is nothing but it is fog, that is vapor, plus some water droplets which are going to be there. Okay, so whenever you put your hand in the mist, you are going to have your hand wet. Okay, whenever it is purely fog, you are not going to do that. So for visualization sake, if I need to explain, imagine this: for a morning walk, whenever you go through, your clothes will never get wet because of it is in the vapor stage. Now similarly, to visualize this mist, if you go for any of the falls, let us say nearby it is Amboli Falls, right? So whenever you go there, whenever you are, let us say 15-20 kilometers away from that falls, you will never feel any kind of difference in atmosphere. Okay, but as soon as you go near that falls, you can see that particular fog which is being formed. But whenever that fog, you are walking through that fog, your clothes will get wet. The reason, because what? In that fog there are some minute water droplets which are available over there. So that's why mist will be fog plus water droplets. So these will be usually conditions are prevailing near any of the waterfalls during favorable conditions. So that is what I can tell you. So fog, you will never get wet, whereas with the mist you are going to get wet, and the best example is your Amboli Falls. Now the last one is frost. So feathering deposit of ice formed on the surface. So feathering deposits of ice formed on the surfaces is called as frost. So what do you mean by feathering? It is like a feather, bird feathers which will be there. So that kind of deposit is nothing but the frost. So this frost is, I can say, similar to the glaze, which what we have studied. In glaze, what has happened? If you keep a chair outside for over the night, so the thin layer of transparent shining ice formed is nothing but glaze. But here frost is nothing but instead of this shining deposit, you are going to have feathered deposits. So the best visualization what I can give you is your old refrigerators. So if you think of old refrigerators with deep freezers, so there you can imagine, if you don't use that refrigerator a lot, deep freezer a lot, so usually there will be some white formed ice will be there at the bottoms and sides. I hope everyone can visualize this part. In your old refrigerators, what that white ice that has been formed for a long, if you don't use that deep freeze for a longer period of time, so that particular deposits in the form of, you can see that formation will not be in the form of a shining glaze type of a precipitation. It will be feathered, like if you touch that, so it will be basically like a feather. You are going to, texture will be like a feather. So such kind of visualization I can give you for a frost, and this is how you can explain with respect to the frost. So frost is feathering deposits of ice formed on the surface. So the best example is your old refrigerators, deep freezers, where you can actually visualize the formation of frost.